Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Spyderco Manix 2 in G10 and steel construction with the S30V and whatnot. First off, I want to thank my buddy Brandon for sending this guy along. This is a really neat knife. In fact, I reviewed a Manix 2 lightweight a long time ago. Terrible review. But nonetheless, it's nice to see the full G10 version. So thanks, Brandon. Let's do a little size comparison for you. Maybe the most relevant size comparisons with some of the other Spydercos. Here's a Spyderco PM2, so you can see you get a little bit less useful blade out of the Manix than the PM2. Spyderco Delica right here. Slightly smaller Spyderco is the Dragonfly. And then, of course, the other constant companions for size comparison, the Ontario Rat number 1 and the Rat number 2 right here. So you can see it's sort of an intermediate size there, but it is huge in the handle, absolutely huge in the handle. We'll get back to that one later. One other thing to mention, like I said, this is the G10 version with the full metal liners and whatnot. There is also a fiberglass reinforced nylon, so closer to what you see on the Delica here, which is very similar as a knife, just a little bit, well, actually a significant amount lighter. And yeah, got some other steel choices there. So let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little knife. So on the good side, first off, this guy is made in the USA, Golden, Colorado, USA Earth. Spyderco is an American company, but a lot of their stuff is made overseas, like the Delica is made in Seki City, Japan. But this guy is American-made, which I always appreciate very much. Next thing, the blade on this guy is great, for a couple of reasons. First off, this is S30V steel, which is a great steel. It is also available in a BD1 steel, which is a less great steel, for about 20 bucks less. And there's an S110V version, which is an even greater steel, for about 40 bucks more. So you can really choose your choice here. Choose your choice? That doesn't even make sense. Anyways, you can choose whatever steel you'd like. But the steel here is great, and the blade itself is really nicely done. It's not, oh my god, thick, which is nice, and it's very tall, so you get a very nice well, it gradually comes out there, which makes this a very nice slicer. This blade is really meant to cut things, which is beautiful. And frankly, I also like the blade finish. It's reflective enough to remind you that it's metal, but it's not so reflective as to be, showing scratches and whatnot. Beautiful thing. So that's good. Next thing, the liners on this guy. These are full liners. So you can see here there is no part of the knife that the liners do not cover, which is nice. And you've also got a metal portion up here, which holds the ball bearing lock. So that's the next thing. The ball bearing lock is kind of a little unusual in Spyderco's lineup, but basically what happens is you pull this little piece back in order to unlock the knife, and so the blade can kind of flop around when that part is open. And then when you lock the knife, it just springs forward because it's on a little spring here. You can see a better view of this in the disassembly video, but the ball bearing lock is pretty nice. It has a lot of the advantages of the Benchmade Axis lock. Don't have one of those handy, but it also, in that, it allows you to just let the blade swing shut like that. It allows you to deploy with the lock only if you'd like. But it doesn't have some of the disadvantages. It's using a much stronger spring rather than the Omega springs on the Benchmade, and frankly, it's a little smoother because it's a ball rolling against the tang of the blade rather than a bar that's scraping along the back of it. So it's a nice comparable sort of lock, but it's different enough, and it's different in some good ways. But it's also strong. It can be free dropping, and it is a relatively smooth lock. So I got no issue with the ball bearing lock here. This is absolutely a solid lock, no freaking problem. That's nice. Next thing on this guy, this is completely ambidextrous, which is nice. You can see here that the ball bearing lock has cutouts on both sides, and it doesn't really matter which hand you use on them. I'm sure I could do this with my left hand if I were just a little bit more left-hand friendly. I am not. And it can also be clipped on the left side as well, so that's nice. And so it is a great choice for a lefty. And then finally, the other beautiful thing here is that this has a lot of sprint runs. Spyderco, because this is made at the Golden factory, will very often do a run of this using maybe a different color G10 and a different steel. So right now I was able to, just with a quick search, find an S90V with CPM 154 composite, which is kind of neat, as well as I found the references to one in M4 steel, which is incredible. And then the lightweight version of this guy has Maximet, which is one of the very neatest steels out there right now. Brand new. Can't wait to get my hands on some of it. But anyways, so you get these sprint runs every so often. So if you want something that's a little bit weird in the steel department, Spyderco can probably hook you up. You're not just stuck with one or two options. So, to me at least, that's what's really good about this. You get the sprint runs, it's ambidextrous. The ball bearing lock has some pretty serious advantages and lacks the disadvantages of some of the competition. The full liners just make this even beefier than it already is and make it a pretty solid feeling knife overall. The blade on this knife is incredible because it's got a nice steel and it's meant to cut. The way it's ground is meant to be a cutting tool, and it's made in the USA to top it all off, which is itself just a beautiful thing. Let's talk about what's great here. To me, what's really great about the Manix are the ergonomics. This knife feels really nice in my hand. I have smaller hands than most, and, so take that for what it's worth. But the thing is, this has contours in every place that I need there to be contours. It's got a great thumb finger choil here. It's got a great thumb ramp. It's got nice jimping everywhere, but it's not super, aggressive, I'm trying to eat your hand right now, so it's a jimping. The clip falls into a nice place in the hand. It's just, this is a knife that is really beautifully designed for the hand. I love it in that way. This is probably in the top 3 most comfortable knives in my hand out there in the world. I say top 3 because, I've handled a lot of knives. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but it's really, really nice. Love, love, love that. The other thing is that this really sticks in your hand. This is not a knife that's going to go flying, and partly because it's got this G10 here, which is borderline maybe a little rough for some. I'm okay with it, but you've also got all this jimping back here. You've got this area. I mean, this is a great knife to take into the Vaseline factory if that's where you're going to be working. This is not going to be going anywhere. So the greatest thing about this knife to me are the ergonomics. This feels incredible in the hand, and once it's in there, it's not going anywhere. Nice, nice, nice. Let's talk about the bad here. On the bad side, honestly, there's not much wrong here. I mean, it's lacking the wire clip as that the lightweight version has. The lightweight's using this little guy here, or at least a version like this. I really prefer the wire clip to the spoon clip that Spyderco gives, but this is still a fine clip, so no real issue there. Next thing on this guy is there is no sharpening choil. You can see here that although they kind of come right to the edge, there's no little cutout here which allows you to sharpen the entire length. Like, for instance, on this knife here, the Boost Blades Aero. Apparently, Eric Gless's explanation is that you're cutting into something, it can fall into the sharpening choil and hang up. Yeah, that's true. At least he's got a reason for it, but honestly, I would like to see a choil there. Next thing is that and these are all, by the way, pretty nitpicky overall. Next thing is that the tip is a little bit on the fragile side. You can see that this thins right out. Compared to, say, your PM2, it's a little bit thinner than your PM2 here, although not by a huge margin. But if you compare it to a knife that's kind of more in the modern overbuilt tradition, like this Spyderco Valaton here, oh man, is that thin. I don't see that as being a big problem, but if you are somebody who uses your knife to pry, which is a stupid idea, by the way, this is probably going to break in half on you. Next thing, I'm not necessarily in love with these plastic texture pads for opening and closing the lock here. They work okay, and they're not very prominent outside the knife on the hole. That's good, at least, but honestly, I don't know that those are the best solutions. In many ways, I prefer the little bolt sticking out the side of Benchmade's Axis lock, which requires you to use a similar motion. You can grab these, it works, but I don't love it, and I don't feel like I've got a great grip relative to the metal bar that you get on the Axis lock there. Then, finally, on the bad side, this is not a hugely space-efficient knife. It's pretty big, actually. It's not super thick, which is nice, but it is a little bit on the heavy side, absolutely. Coming in at 4.9 ounces, according to my scale. Yeah, according to my scale. And it's also pretty large. I mean, the blade-to-handle ratio isn't great. You get this much sharpened blade when all of this is finger choil and lockup. And, overall, it's pretty wide in the pocket. It is a biggish knife in the pocket. The ergonomics work out. I can't really argue with it too hard, but it is not a tiny knife. You will feel this in your pocket, and it doesn't disappear in the same way that, for instance, your Spyderco Delica does, which is a much smaller knife. But that's not so bad. So that's the bad for me. It's not terribly space efficient. It's a little bit heavy. The lightweight version is not, obviously. I'm not in love with the plastic texture pads here. The tip is going to be a little fragile for some people in some uses. The sharpening choil is a notable absence here, and I do wish that they used the wire clip, but I may be the only person who feels that way. Let's talk about the ugly. There are two ugly things about this knife, and they're kind of the same thing. The first one is that Spyderco, as of March 2017, is using a lot of red Loctite in their knives. And it's a permanent form of thread locker. It's kind of akin to a glue, and this guy was slathered in it, which meant that any time I used the driver in here, it fought me. And so I actually needed to use a soldering iron to heat up each one of these screws individually to unscrew them the first time. After you do it once, then it's fine, and you can use a less permanent thread locker, blue Loctite, which is what they should be using. But still, that was pretty ugly to me. And it just means that you're going to need to go through an extra step when you disassemble to maintain it. Actually, that brings us to the second bit of ugly, which is that taking this knife apart isn't a great idea anyways. It's got a peened lanyard tube here, which means that you can't actually completely disassemble the knife. Instead, you can kind of spread it open. You can use the lanyard. I mean, you saw the disassembly video, but that's a little bit unpleasant. Taking it apart does void the warranty, which is separately and differently unpleasant, and you kind of get the impression that this knife was not really made to be disassembled. That's not the end of the world, and obviously you can still get a good deal of the performance out of it just by, for instance, washing it out every so often, blowing it out with some hot air, and then oiling it back up, but still, this is not well made to be disassembled, and it voids the warranty, and they put a crap ton of Loctite on it. And all of those things, at least to me, are pretty ugly. But, you know, that's life with Spyderco these days. Let's talk final conclusions. Okay, final conclusions. First off, this is proof that Spyderco as a company is in good hands, because it seems lately that Sal Glesser is handing his, slowly moving control of the business over to his son, Eric Glesser, and Eric Glesser is the guy who designed this knife. This is a great knife design, and if the future of Spyderco looks like this, well, Spyderco is going to be just fine. So that's good. Second thing, this knife itself is in a lot of ways defined by what it's not. It's not a pry bar. It's not an overbuilt beast in the same sense, built like a tank that a lot of modern knives are. It's also not pocket jewelry. It's not an art knife. It's not going to be the belle of any balls like this little guy, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be. It's not a super action showpiece. It doesn't use fancy materials. No Timascus to be found here. It's not a combat knife. I mean, it's none of these things. What this is a serious cutting tool. It's meant for serious cutting work. And so that's kind of where you land on this guy. It's big, it's ergonomic, and it's incredible. If you're just after an everyday carry knife, but you don't have any particular cutting task in mind, there are lots of good options that are going to be a little smaller and a little less serious than this guy. For instance, the Native 5 is in many ways the little brother to this guy and is a solid gem. It's an incredible knife, which is a little bit more on the smaller carryable side. Or the Spyderco Delica, for that matter. This is one of the very best everyday carry knives out there, if not the best, and well, this is a much better choice if you're just throwing something in your pocket in case you need to cut something. But the thing is, if you are in the situation where you use a knife all damn day long, then the Manix 2, particularly in a high-end steel, is one of the very best knives you can get. Because you get great steel choices, great cutting geometry, solid lock. It's great in the hand, and there's just nothing so wrong with it. And if you want something lighter, you can do the lightweight version, which is also a solid gem. So this knife is absolutely a gem. It's not a knife that's meant for me. Frankly, it's not a knife that's meant for a lot of people. But if you are the target market and you have a knife in your hand all damn day and you're cutting and you need a folding knife, then by God, this is a really stellar choice. It's a wonderful, wonderful cutting tool. I think it's worth the price, and I think it will serve you well. So there you go. That's the Manix 2 in the G10. Beautiful, beautiful thing. I kind of wish I had use for this, but alas, I'm just a little too pretentious pocket jewelry type. That's okay, though. We're all a little bit Manix about our knives. Okay. All right, have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.